Taylor Swift is a link builder. There were rumors that she would get engaged. Our client said, let's give them a free wedding venue. And then we got them 50 links. That's digital PR.
Managing multiple clients or large websites? Automate your SEO with Ellie AI. Start your free trial now.
Wix Studio, one end-to-end web creation platform for your agency to deliver exceptional work with absolute efficiency.
Welcome to the Brighton SEO Analytics panel. I'm Ellie. I'm the head of consulting at Eclipse. I've got 12 years of experience in the CRO and analytics industry. I'm going to be interviewing these three lovely people. We've got Jonathan, who's a tech SEO and analytics consultant with over 15 years experience in the industry. He loves solving problems with data. He struck out on his own around 4 years ago and hasn't looked back. Kiera, on the far end, is a freelance digital analytics consultant with over 10 years experience in the industry. She believes in data democratization. She recently started her journey freelancing after several years in-house in a corporate world. And then finally, last but not least, we've got Anna. She likes to say that what she lacks in height, she makes up for in feistiness. She's been in SEO for some number of years. And around 8 years ago started her own web analytics agency, which is called Polkadot Data. She helps clients fix their analytics and make their data actionable. So welcome everyone, quick round of applause for everybody. So what I wanted to do was start off by asking each person one question that is kind of something in their area of subject matter expertise. And before I do that though, what I wanted to get a quick gauge on in the room is, could you tell me if you're in-house? Quickly put up your hand if you're in-house. So we've got a good number of in-house people. Can you tell me if you're kind of agency client / freelance side? Okay, so 50-50 split. How about number of people here who are actively using GA4 today? And that's like nearly everybody in the room. Anyone like a hardcore random Adobe user who's just like quietly come in and is hiding at the back? No, nobody. And if you use something that's not one of those two, that's one of the sort of fringe ones that's come up on the market. Anything else? There we go. So we've got like one person who's using other things. So now I know that you guys, we're probably going to talk a bit about GA4 in the session. So it's good that everybody here has got that kind of context. And then I think the other thing we wanted to know is, are you generally with analytics a beginner? Put your hand up if you're kind of more at the beginning of your career. And if you're at the advanced stage of your career or intermediate. There we go. So we've got a good mixture of people in the room. So it's a good thing that we planned lots of questions that were all about GA4. So I was going to start off with Jonathan. And the first question we're going to ask was, how do you use GA4?
I don't use the front-end reports that much at the moment. That's not a weird flex. I just don't tend to use it that much. But I do the odd explore. I think most of my client base is like sites that don't have the big query link at the moment. So you kind of you speak to people and you're trying to make them aware that sort of big query links, so that the link exists in the first instance. And then you sort of start moving into other ways of how to interrogate the data. So I use primarily the API a lot. I use that with pandas to do a lot of my sort of analysis, just because I find that easier. But I do use other things like the no code solutions, like the connector for G Sheets and so on and so forth. But it tends to be sort of a ad hoc approach depending on the question that is being asked.
And what would you say are the main things that you really can achieve and you really can't achieve with GA4? That's a really broad question, but
I think the main thing that melted my brain was trying to get your head around the new event model, right? That you're basically going into explorations and you got to filter by an event name a lot of the time. You're trying to get meaningful data out, or I think a lot of us just started out by trying to recreate some basic reports transaction ID, that sort of type of thing. So it sort of started off like that, and then once you sort of get a bit more comfortable with working with it, it becomes a lot easier. And then you start doing more, and you're trying to like do things a bit quicker. And basically, like then I started like looking at automation options there. So hopefully a bit of a primer there.
Good. And then I think, Anna, you were going to tell us about top GA4 myths that you'd like to bust.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of us have been through a lot of traumatic transition period from Universal Analytics. So I empathise. I've been there. It's been a bit of a challenge working with this new system, new data model, and trying to work out, how you can still get the most out of it whilst everything you try and do appears to be a lot harder. It's so wonderful that you can customize it so much more, but that means everybody using it has to increase their knowledge of it. So the ease of access is not quite as there as it was with Universal, and even then, when Universal was pretty plug and play, it still wasn't great for everybody, and there were still so many mistakes. So we're still seeing a lot of implementation issues. We're seeing a lot of people who don't quite get the implementation right. And then we're also seeing that when you do get the implementation right, you're still questioning it because the data doesn't look right. So there'll be a lot of people here thinking, I need to find out more about GA4 because I cannot trust the data. My business doesn't trust the data. I'm trying to justify my marketing budgets or whatever it might be, but I can't be confident that this number is correct. So ranting aside, I'm going to try not to rant. There's a couple of things that it's really good to just...
That's what we've secretly come for, Anna.
Okay, yeah, we're here for a therapy
to watch
session,
you rant,
right?
so.
Ranting and therapy, I'm all for that. Find me in a bar later if you need more of that. So on to the main points, really. There's a couple of myths, and we've been sort of getting frustrated with certain things recently. So I helped run another event called Measure Camp, which was about 10 days ago, and we were lucky enough to have some Google representatives from the GA4 team there. So we interrogated them, and they very kindly also brought along some myths and tips and things like that. So there's a couple of things that I want to keep sharing to everybody that they've confirmed that are known things that they are working on. So hopefully I'm allowed to say this on a podcast that's being published live, but I think it's okay to let people know. But there's a lot of people have seen an increase in direct traffic. Now, they said they fixed this bug, but it's not quite fixed for everybody. So there's still a lot of people still seeing more direct traffic than you should be. And that's because some of the channels, your traffic comes in via a multitude of the channels, but it isn't always attributed correctly. And it's supposed to, after the 72 hours of processing, the processing is supposed to put it into the correct channels. And after 72 hours, your data should be more accurate. This isn't always happening. So there is still some channel data that is not being correctly attributed. So direct is likely to be greater than it was in Universal. They are still looking into that one. There's issues with not set appearing. Now that can be related to Audience Center. The only way to reduce the not set is to turn off Audience Center. You're not going to want to do that necessarily. So you're just going to have to accept there's going to be a bit of not set traffic in there. It's just events that are not associated with the rest of the session and the rest of the channel. So that's kind of handy to know. There's also, without going on and taking up the whole session, this could be, but there's also the user, if the user parameters are not consistent throughout, then your session may break and come apart as two sessions, which ruins your funnels. So you might need to go and rebuild those from a different perspective. And a few other issues there.
So it's looking really bright,
on the
is
good
what you're
news,
saying.
on the good news, right, I've got good news. Drum roll, please, because annotations are coming back. They're in the roadmap. Do I get a cheer? No? No. There you go. So there's one good. They are working on a very long roadmap. So yeah, they're taking all our feedback on board. So if you have issues, do keep raising them. They are taking it on board. And once you get used to it, it is all right. We can work with this. We just have to know. And then the other issues on data is that there's so many different ways of looking at it now. So yes, we can come back to those ones. We'll loop back around to more
We might have
data
to have
discrepancies.
questions from the audience about.
Yeah, definitely. If we've got time for
struggles.
questions, have a think and give us a shout later if you've got some.
Well, that was a really helpful summary and definitely really useful stuff from actually quizzing real people at Google. So that's very helpful. And then finally, Kiera, I was going to ask you, you've just made a transition from a sort of corporate world into a freelancing world. Like, what are you doing with data now? How are you working with data?
Yeah, sure. So earlier in the year, I worked for an agency, and as we know, it's quite difficult with working within an agency because you're getting your clients and you want them to buy in, right? So if the data's not looking great, so I was using GA4 earlier in the year quite a lot, the free version, and also the paid version. But right now, I'm using Matomo Analytics on my own website. Obviously, the traffic is really low, so it's not like anything epic to look at.
Although if everyone in the room could go to Kiera's website.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And increase the amount of traffic on her website.
No annotations though, so I can't do that. Yeah, so that's how I've been using it at the moment. But GA4, my personal experience has been quite difficult. Again, going to clients that aren't necessarily sometimes even interested in digital and the data associated, they just want to see results. So getting that buy-in from them again is incredibly difficult. We all know that most of us have either been on or have conducted GA training sessions. It's like a whole re-education piece now. Getting that buy-in is really, really difficult, like I said. But even if you've got people that are very data literate, they're going to question everything down to a T. But that's, for me, my experience in an agency trying to win new business and also trying to retain business. I think in-house it's a bit easier. I did work in-house, so I'm not making a judgment. I worked in-house at Newsweek, and it was a little bit easier to get your head around that and have people buy in and things. But yeah, it's been traumatic as well.
So I think something that's kind of come through a little bit in the conversation we were having in the prep for the session was around actually making the case for a business case for data, not only for using data, but also how do you collect the data to make your business case in the first place. So both kind of directions. I don't know if each one of you wants to kind of offer a little bit of a piece of advice or a tool tip that you might, offer to the audience in terms of making the case for using more analytics.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. I think you got to have actually know at the moment, because there's just been this whole thing, is it actually an implementation issue or a platform problem? So that's been really hard, and now we're getting confirmation of bugs that people are kind of aware of. So the first point for me would be just you have to have an idea of how accurate your data is to a point. So more you haven't got common implementation bugs, things like that. So at least you're doing things like transaction reconciliations. I mean, that's probably number one thing I see. I see with people that I work with is they don't really know if you're under reporting, over reporting on certain things. So it's really hard now because you don't necessarily have that time series data, going back super far back in time potentially. Hopefully people did take benchmarks from UA data, but not everyone did. Not everyone knew that they had to do that. So that's really difficult. I think that's going to have an impact now on forecasting potentially, just because you don't have the data going back far enough. Or how do you solve that if you start working with someone that's just unfortunately not got very good data to begin with? So I think the first starting point has got to be you've got to establish what's good, what's bad, and then you can start managing expectations, or basically start doing things like requirements gathering to then prioritize their requirements and then turn that into a bit of sort of an analytics roadmap for the client.
Okay, I'll go up next. I guess getting the buy-in is, as Jonathan said, about the data quality is first and foremost, because you can't, if you get that buy-in and that later along the line the data is faulty or corrupted, you're just going to lose all that trust that you built up. So I think data quality is certainly the first step along the way. I've found that to try and get people to buy in and interested, whether that's you're maybe trying to get other people in, if you're working in-house, different departments such as product management, etc., there's a book called Freakonomics, and in it talks about incentivizing. So talk to the person in layman's terms, and also why is it actually important to them. So for instance, if you have a CRM executive and they're doing a newsletter, say, look, you can look at your analytics to see how well it's doing, look at the themes in it. So you're getting that interest from that person. They'll talk to other people. You're getting that trust built up. So that's what I try and do when I'm working in-house. And then when I'm working in an agency trying to pitch new business, it's usually bringing it back to the wider business goals. So, for instance, if we had like a big pharma client, what's their global strategy? What do they want to do in 5 years? Because there'll be someone in that room at C-suite that isn't really wanting to talk about maybe, impressions and traffic, etc. You've just got to loop it back to that kind of wider goal. So that's how I try and bring it about. Because when I started out in this, it was really difficult. I was like, oh my God, what is this? So try and make it as simple as possible so people then are more interested and buy in.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say the same sort of thing. It's all about the objectives. What is the bloody purpose of having any data? Like, why are you even doing this? But think not just what's the purpose of the data, why do you even have a website? What is the purpose of the business? Let's work it all the way back and think, right, what are we going to then do with this? So using that, you can take that on board as your whole measurement plan. What are you going to do? Why are you doing it? Once you know those things, you can get much more justification because you can get granular. Like Kiera said, you could say, well, this is why we're doing a newsletter, because it could increase your ROI by this. And then you can start using the data to justify what benefit you're bringing to the business. And this is how you get a pay rise, right? No? But that's right. You've got to prove the value of what you're doing. But you've got to obviously get that buy-in. So yeah, understanding the objectives. Now, it might not be the business objectives. It might not be your team's objectives. You've got to sort of subtly get in there and work out what each person you're working with's hidden agenda might be. Because actually, we all care about slightly different things in different ways. And it might be that actually they say that revenue, but actually it might turn out to be new customer acquisition. So we need to know if that revenue is coming from new or returning, or we need to know what's going on. So understanding the baseline, as Kiera said, is really the key thing. Understanding the purpose, and then you can start your plan, and then you can justify it, and then you can collect it, check it's accurate. Once you hope it's accurate enough, it's never these days going to be 100% accurate. We're looking at probably an 80% average of accuracy these days. It's the best we've got. So also remember to educate your seniors that we're not looking for 100% accuracy. We are looking for trends. We are here to say, well, actually, this is performing at this rate and this is performing at this rate. So with that, we invest more here. It's not that this did exactly this. That's not where we are anymore. 15 years ago, analytics was much more accurate. But nowadays, we've got to take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. Context, situation, and the bigger picture. Put all of that together, and you can start doing things. So you've got to remember to step back and be a bit more human when it comes to the data. I know that's a challenge for some of us, I'll be honest. We've all got to turn on the human brain sometimes and be like, right, okay, I can do this real people thing. What is the purpose? And then you can start to use it in a much more beneficial way.
And I think actually, Anna, you've kind of preempted my next question, which is, I think when we were chatting earlier, we were reflecting on different scenarios where we've each struggled either with managing a difficult stakeholder or having to manage up to someone where you're managing their expectations. Do the three of you have any strategies for, particularly in the data world where stuff can be quite abstract, ways to not just manage expectations, but really to manage up with others? And maybe without naming any names, maybe give a nice example if you've got one. I feel like Anna clearly has one.
I'm looking at you because if anybody else hasn't heard the term managing up, I don't know, have I been living in a cave? But I haven't heard that. I just live in my own world, I guess. But managing up, as I was told this morning, is all about adding the additional explanation that is required to sort of preempt what's going to come next and sort of filling the whole picture.
Like over-communicating when a deadline might be and making sure someone's not in the dark about when something might actually be delivered, and then they're therefore not chasing you at 11 o'clock at night to find out where is that bit of analytics.
So this is something that I actually train my team to do without knowing what it was called. So we live in a world where we're pretty straightforward people. When we're working with data, we just say it as it is, right? We forget sometimes that empathy is out there or that people have feelings. So we have to remember this, and we have to remember that you have to start with the hello bit and the nicety. Then you have to put in what it is. Now, you can't just say the data layer is broken or organic traffic went up by 5%. Right? That is not enough. It makes sense to you. You know exactly what that means. You know if that's good or bad, but they don't. So keep asking yourself, so what? So what? And if you've just got to make sure you put enough so whats in your communication that everybody understands the full picture so they know what they need to do next. So organic traffic went up by 5%. This is not good enough. We need to double down on XYZ. I need you to blah, blah, blah. Or the data layer is broken, so-and-so needs to fix this particular part of it. So we need the detail. We need who, what, where, when, how. It sounds like we're going back to school with all of those things. But look at your email and think, if I sent that to my mum, would she know what to do with that? Right? And that's often how I work out how to describe this. If I was to talk to my mum...
If your mum is a GA4 user, obviously.
She is not. No, but even so, would they understand at least who needs to do something? So, do think, would somebody having a bad day still be able to understand what they need to do from this? Would somebody in a hurry quickly know what to do with this information? So that's where I find that we have to put the extra into the communication to do that piece that you might call managing up. But again, I've waffled on. I'll let somebody else speak.
Yeah, I think communication's key. Often in the place that I was just working, I even used to do the Reddit thing, like too long didn't read, like at the top, and then underneath I'd write all the various stipulations, because if you do have someone that's kind of like a bit more techie, they can read into the ins and outs of it, why it is or isn't important. Another place I worked, insurance firm, would send an email out every day, and it was simply just a graph. And it sounds boring, but people can look at it and straight away know, like, it's up, it's down. They've got so many emails to read, rather than reading, your sentence, or I always say, like, let's not make it Ulysses, you know what I mean? Like, it just goes on and on and on. It's like, what's the actual point? Why, like you said, why do I actually care? So I just think communication's key, really, and bringing it back to the simple terms.
Yeah, I think should place a premium on changing your communication style for different stakeholders. And it sounds a bit cliched if you, if anyone's aware of like the book Surrounded by Idiots, that's like a good like mental model of how to potentially understand people better. But the reality is that some people are able to make like really fast, quick decisions, and then other stakeholders you're working with really want that level of detail. So I think there should try and place an emphasis on trying to understand like who you're working with. In if in an in-house context, that's probably a lot easier because these are your colleagues, you spend a lot of time with them. In an agency context, it's trickier, right? Because you're interfacing, say, with like that point of contact, but you might like the stuff that you're sending them might be like just a fraction of like their work over an entire week. Like they might be interfacing with you like 5% of their time and the rest of the time. So you kind of get one shot at getting that sort of whatever you're trying to communicate over the line. I think my brother works like weirdly in like financial, you have like a large financial institution, but they have like this KPI of like the percentage of like client queries that they answer first time. So things like that I think are really fascinating. Is like how can you like measure like the effectiveness of like your communication? So they have that like percentage of queries answered like first time, or percentage of queries like answered by someone who's like a junior, for example. So again, that shows that you're actually transferring skills, transferring knowledge to help them like answer questions. But I think general stuff like reverse pyramid writing style, I think that's very important. And
do you want to explain what that is for anyone who doesn't know? Yes,
the reverse pyramid is sort of like adding like the important information at the top. I try to use like action words as well in the titles of emails, like start with a verb, like this is what we want to do, this is the thing we want like to accomplish there. And then that reverse pyramid is start with like the key point at the top and then start going into the details. So then you're covering off people that like think fast and people that feel reassured because they need more detail because they can't make the decision without knowing like the full picture. And I think the other thing is like if you're in an agency context is quite often the email you might write is going to get forwarded on maybe to someone in account handling. I'm not going to start like bashing account managers here, but they might have to forward that email on again. And then, so your email goes through like 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that's why I'm saying like get it right first time, because like by the time it gets to say like a data layer question, by the time it gets to the dev and the dev comes back saying, I don't know what that data type should be for that value, then it's like you've just like burnt a week, right? So it's the emphasis trying to get it right first time, because the impact that has on like project delivery and just like actually positioning yourself as an expert. Because you see that, I see that quite a lot in terms of like people starting out, there's always loads of talks here at brightonSEO on like how to implement technical recommendations. I think that's a very similar sort of problem the analytics community has as well. So I think like there's a lot of crossover there between writing good like tickets for SEO and actually communicating effectively in an analytics context as well.
I think somebody did a talk on communication last.
Wasn't that
time?
Was that you?
Was
that not you? Yeah, maybe.
I did write it up. There are some slides if it helps. Although I've got more to add to it because I've just learned what a reverse pyramid is. So we've also always got to understand that there's more. We don't always know everything. So even if you think you know loads, actually it might just be that there's still so much more to go, whether it's on communication or the analytics or the business or nuances of whatever. If you want to, I did put my slides on the website, Focus.Data's website. So if you want to have a look, feel free. Communication is the only way to get your message across, isn't it?
Yeah, I think as well, something you started to touch on there is that feeling of like you need to learn continuously, and you're each at different stages in your career learning different things. And I think one of the things that we were reflecting on earlier was, how do you deal with ambiguity? So like that shift of things are starting to change, maybe you feel adrift because you're using GA4 now, or maybe you've moved career and are feeling adrift. There's lots of things that you can do and strategies to fix that. So is there anything that any of you would advise when you're trying to deal with ambiguity in life? Or in data? You could keep the scope down to just data if you want to.
Who wants to go first?
I guess for me, like I'm quite into sport. Like, sorry if it's a bit off topic. That kind of keeps me sane, like going weightlifting or going running. But I guess if you're not into that, there's so many other things. Like if you're into creative things like painting, it just chills you out. That's what I find. Like if you're doing a transition, like whether that's from one job to another, or you're going freelance, or actually if you're just in your job right now and you're burnt out and you're sick of it, like just take a step back and sort of think there's more to life than this. Like obviously this is our job and we're all really super into it, but you have to like look after yourself as well. I'm sorry it's going a bit like woo-woo now, but that's how I sort of deal with it in that respect. Like I can get so stressed out, I'm at my computer and I'm sometimes got a hot head and I'm like, oh, fuck's sake, whatever. And then I'm like, right, just go for a run, just get it out. Don't respond to that email, come back and think, like you said, you don't know the full picture. What's going on in that person's life? Maybe they're getting bashed by their boss for this. They just don't understand it, Like, so take a step away and then go back, like with a better mindset. That's how I deal with it.
Definitely. I should do that. I like to hide under a rock for as long as possible. Ostrich effect. This is what we name it in my company. We just say, "Oh, I'm ostriching." Sorry, but basically, you've got to pull yourself out of that, and then suddenly you've got some catching up to do. So you can't pace it steadily and learn at a pace. You've suddenly got to. So with GA4, it's like no. Oh God, and then had to throw ourselves in. And some of you will have done the same. Literally, you have to dive in and just go for it. You have to become one with it. That's a horrible way of saying it. I hate that, sorry. But you have to really get stuck in. The best way to get stuck in is just do it. And if you're not sure, you've just got to practice on your own website, or you've just got to have a go with a different type of website. There's demo websites out there. Use all the resources and everything, and just go through that and try and learn as much. I feel like I've gone off topic. Was it ambiguity or was it?
It is, but I think.
Sorry, there's ambiguity in my answer.
No, but I think also what you're teasing out a little bit there is feeling comfortable with your own discomfort. So both your answers actually in a funny way. It was like, oh, I didn't like this email this person sent me. I have a coping strategy for how I deal with that.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of saying like, I don't, I'm learning something which makes me feel uncomfortable, but I should feel comfortable with my own discomfort because it's the only way that you're going to get used to the new thing. And I think one of the things that you see as people start to get a bit more mature in the industry and a bit more experienced is that they get slowly more and more comfortable with feeling on the back foot sometimes, or feeling uncomfortable. And I think one of the things that can feel very daunting when you're first starting out in your career is you think you should be right and you think you should have the right answer, and when your boss asks you something, you think you should have a yes or no answer straight away. And 100%, people, one of the companies I used to work at someone in the senior leadership team was sort of an ex-Amazon person. He always used to say, I would rather you said, I don't know, and this is the amount of time it's going to take me to go and find out the answer for you, or I don't know and I don't think the answer is possible, than you like lied in the meeting. Not lied, but like you faked an answer, or you said something.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, actually, you know, you're creating less ambiguity for that person, but you're also making your own life easier.
Responding back with, that's a great question. You know, that's a great weird statement about this data, whatever it is. That's an interesting set of data. Let's look into it. That's a great question. Let's look into it. It's a great way of just buying yourself time to go and work out what the hell's going on, and whether something's wrong, or whether it's just an anomaly, or whether there was a cause for this, or something's broken. So yeah, just buy yourself some time, go for a run, calm down, then respond, that sort of thing. Yeah, just look after, you know, don't panic. We're all continually learning, aren't we?
Yeah, I think I was going to say, like, ambiguity is sort of the reality for many of us now, is that we have to make decisions without having the complete picture. That can be like clients not telling you stuff. Probably your boss isn't telling you everything a lot of the time. So it's really difficult to like have a full understanding of like what the sort of the complete picture is. It's sort of like one of those like, I don't know, I'm going to say like Zelda, you know, when you're playing Zelda and like half the world's like completely in darkness, right? And you start out and you know this little bit of the world, and then you start moving around and you start to uncover little bits of information. So I think there it's like, you know, it's building, a lot of what we do is like cross-functional, isn't it? So it's building, sort of trying to build like little bits of relationships with different people to try and get those sort of missing bits of information. I think that can definitely help, but I mean, the reality is, I didn't want to turn this into GA4 bashing, but like, why not? The reality is, you might pull a number, your colleague might pull a number, and the client's probably going to pull a number, and they're probably going to be different. That's like definite ambiguity, right? So I think the point there is trying to tie that back to like, what decision are we trying to make here off the back of the data? So that for me is like actually just tying it back to like, what decisions can we make? What decisions can we make with confidence? And then the other way of dealing with it is, I think, trying to anticipate what might change. So trying to have that forward thinking perspective in terms of what happens if this X goes up, what happens if Y goes down, or is it worth, actually, I think it's worth spending a lot of time thinking out what things not to do. So this tendency, like, yeah, we got to go and do it all. Actually, just like chill and have a think, like, actually, what would happen if the status quo remained? Like, is like anything? Are we actually not able to make a decision because of the current status quo? So that helps you sort of, I think, like, try and reverse that thinking almost, to try and like get an idea of how to prioritize or just deal with that uncertainty.
I also think there's an aspect of using data in general that always has some form of, maybe not ambiguity, but you know, like I think I said this earlier, like, you might know what the output is or the thing you're aiming towards is, but how you get there is maybe a bit of a mystery until you get into the data and you get there. Like if you think of, you know, when you're trying to do something like a discovery, for example, where you might be pulling lots of different data sources and you don't know how complete they are and you don't know if they've got good data quality until you really get in there, and then you suddenly realize, oh right, that's like 6 months of the data in GA that I just can't use, so actually I can't include that in the analysis I'm going to do. Some stuff from Hotjar is just full of people who've like spam botted it into the Hotjar incoming feedback button, so actually I've got loads of junk in there. So actually, until you get to the output where you pull it all together and you kind of tell a little bit of a story with what you're doing, it can feel really ambiguous on the way. Like that, it can be, you know, I've seen junior members of my team, for example, get really uncomfortable with the fact that they're in this sort of discovery quagmire where they don't know where they are. They just know they need to get over here, and they're like, how do I get over there? And I think probably that's a little bit of a good segue into, you know, what does data storytelling mean to each of you? You know, how would you define it, and what do you think good data storytelling looks like?
I mean, that's That's a good question. Let me get back to you. No, there's so many things.
Good managing up, Anna. That was really good.
That's right. No, it's really about doing what we said. Think about the objectives and think about what's the other thing that we said?
Wider business.
The wider business, reflecting accuracy, objectives, and keeping it real. Relating it to the person. That was it. Objectives, relatable. And yeah, making it real just makes so much more sense, and that's what you need to use a story to do. So they're massively beneficial, but it doesn't always need to look like a story. So you've just got to think about.
Could you explain that in a bit more?
Well, you're not going to write, Goldilocks
it's not a Disney film.
Got some data, yeah. Then Goldilocks didn't like the first set of data, so Goldilocks got a second set. You don't need to write that. You just say, well, actually, we've done this investigation, and this is what we found. So this is what that means. So this was then the consequence. And then after you found the consequence, well, what's going to happen next? How do we need to achieve our fairy tale ending?
What does the fairy tale ending really mean
exactly.
to you?
So that's how do we achieve those objectives? What are our objectives? How do we loop it back to our objectives? And what are the steps along the story to get us there? So I need Bob to fill in chapter 7, and I'm going to need Jane to do chapter 8, to be able to just fill in all the pieces that you need to make that story complete and to see the full thing and to get that objective achieved. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's so important, data storytelling, especially again at the agency, trying to get people to buy in and do new pitches and things like that, but also in-house. With data storytelling, it's like you've got your data, your visualization, your narrative. So I think Jonathan touched upon it earlier, though, you need to know your audience. So is this someone that's like really shit hot with their data, or is it someone that's a bit more, they might actually even be the CEO, but they're not so much interested. So know your audience and how that looks, whether that's a old school PowerPoint report or it's, a Power BI dashboard or whatever. Like, know your audience, put that data in there. If they're more into visualizations, you've got that. If they're more into actually, I want, the Ulysses of it, I think that's the way to go. So again, with the pictures and things, what I used to do is I'm unashamedly as well, I look at everyone's LinkedIn. I'm like, well, what are they interested in? I actually pitched to a guy once with his own strapline about data and then won it. You know what I mean? So again, just research your audience and how that looks, because again, you might have a very simplistic report and then someone's like, this is not in depth enough, and vice versa. You might have a really tech heavy, full of acronyms and tech speak, which I absolutely hate because you alienate your audience. And like you said about that email is going to get passed around if you're sending it to a client. Everyone needs to understand it, and you're never going to get more buy-in if everyone doesn't understand it. So yeah, it's so important, data storytelling. And even right now, or if you're at pitches or things like that, you have to try and communicate it well, to be honest. And with authority as well, you're there because you have expertise, so do it with confidence, but equally, it's not bad saying, I don't understand that. I know it's quite hard, but if you do just say, I don't understand that. I've done it, I've worked with big pharma companies, and they're full of acronyms. I'm like, what does that actually mean? Rather than trying to guess it, because you'll just save yourself a lot of hassle in the long run.
Yeah, I was going to say, like a good story, right, should have a beginning, middle, and end. I think if I think back to when I started, so my first ever agency job, I just used to get screamed at by the client services director. I'd do my shit SEO slides. They were really shit, and you'd get screamed at what's the story? And I was like, I don't even know what's the story meant. I just thought it was literally an Oasis album, and I just didn't have a clue about what that actually meant, and really what we were trying to do as a team. This I was the SEO guy, we had PPC, so on and so forth, was actually to bring our slides or deliverables together so that we were basically communicating a cohesive message to the client. And I was quite fortunate that I was working with some actually talented people that are a lot smarter than me, and more often than not, they would be able to translate that into sort of a story, and that was always in a performance context. But I think over time, like, so for me, that was like where I say, like, always try and tell a story or a narrative. And I think that goes back to then, like, understanding your stakeholders, right? Because, like, a lot of the time, like, some people just want to see, like, the result up front, or sometimes people want you to take them through that sort of bit of discovery, then how you drew that conclusion. But my sort of one thing that does work for me is I bought this thing called Pip Decks, and it's called Storytelling Tactics. And that's really, really good in terms of, it's like playing cards, and you pick out a card, and you can come up with like a theme. Like, so there's different cards or different themes in terms of what you're trying to communicate. So I've used them for talks in the past. Like, one of my favorite ones is like, just based on like the work I tend to do, is like, it's called like the data detectives. So you sort of start telling out like you're a detective and you're trying to find like the root cause of a problem. And this is sort of like what you learned along the way. And then that's how you then communicate it. So I think storytelling's very powerful. I would just say, yeah, buy Pip Decks. I'm not getting commission off them.
And there are different kinds of Pip Decks for different
they're
things.
They're all really
There's
good.
There's like some UX and research ones.
But I'm aware of like clients I work for that do like themed retros. They're like super cool at just getting everyone like really engaged. Like, I remember like someone did like a Game of Thrones retro or something. It was like a Miro board, and it was like all themed and stuff like that. So I think that's really, really cool. That just helps. And I think just probably like you can do exercises with your teammates where you just like get your friends to like tell a story. I think I did one with Kyle here at the front in the DMU. So I'm like a freelancer community, but we did like a storytelling Friday where you basically try telling a story about like how you, I think, toss a yeah, no, I can't. You toss a stick over a river. So like, if you sort of say like, how do you throw a stick over a river? There's like a million ways. I think everyone in here could tell a different story on like how to do that very, very basic thing. Like, because some people are like making out is like you're like throwing it over like the mouth of the Amazon. And I was just like, yeah, I'm chucking it over like the River Chell, which is like about this wide, because like there's no chance of, I don't know, actually it's a stick, it was a mobile phone. So you got a bit more skin in the game there if you drop your phone. But the point was that everyone like went through that storytelling process, and I think that just sort of helps in terms of like your creativity and your style and your delivery in terms of that. So yeah, those are like my tips. Just tell stories with your colleagues, and yeah, get Pip Decks.
I think that also helps when you've maybe got data sources that can be explained in different ways. Like, you've got a heat map, one of you interprets it one way, one of you interprets it another way, and actually you kind of need to bring that together so that then when you're presenting it to the client, you've got a cohesive way of explaining it, but also that you can say, look, this doesn't necessarily mean this. We need to be open to the idea that it could mean more than one thing, and I think that's a good way of practicing for that.
Yeah. Can I just be really controversial, because this is all reminding me of the fact that people sit there going, oh, I've got imposter syndrome. I don't know as much as Kiera. I don't know as much as Jonathan. I've never worked out how to tell a story about throwing a mobile over a river. I've never done these things. But what I would just wanted to say is that you might be sitting here thinking, oh my God, these people, know this. Do not feel imposter syndrome. I know that's easy to say, but we all just have to accept that all of us have more to learn. There's always stuff out there that every other human will know that you don't know, and you don't always need to know it all. You just need to know what you need to do good as the human that you are, and that we are all just humans. So give yourself a bit of patience, because we don't need to know all of this stuff to do a good job. You can still do a good job with what you know, but just accept and give yourself grace that there's always more to learn, and be ready to learn and take that opportunity to learn. But don't go feeling bad if any of this is new to you. Feel like this is a great opportunity to learn, and always use that. Whether you're trying to write an email and struggling, just learn off people around you. And always just, whatever you're doing, you can still just keep learning and keep doing better. So never feel like you're an imposter. That's just something I wanted to, so it all just sort of came down to, people might be thinking they're an imposter without knowing this sort of stuff. You're not, you're just doing you, and that's fine. You be you, treat everyone like a human.
You don't have to know everything all the time.
God, no,
and
we're all
actually,
human.
when you see someone more senior than you in the industry and it looks like they know everything, they're either like got a really convincing game face, right? Or they're just very comfortable with the fact that they don't know everything, and they try to explain what they do know information about, which maybe after sort of 20 years in the industry, they do have experience.
Just like a swan gliding through that water.
I love the swan analogy.
Everyone needs a swan analogy every now and again. But, you know, that swan, you're just gliding, but underneath you're like paddling like mad. So
they've just got a great game face. That means that they are terrified underneath. They've just faked in their facial expression that they're not terrified underneath. So
yeah. I think another thing that helped me, which I like came across by accident ages ago, was I think there's always like this slide that goes around like Brighton SEO and like which chart to choose. It's a really good like El Clasico sort of slide that helps you like figure out charts when you're starting out, which is good. And I just started looking at that and actually found that the guy that came up with that, he's got this thing called the extreme presentation method. It's really good. It basically goes through like one of these like McKinsey frameworks where it's like situation, complication, resolution. But I've used that a lot over the years, and that's like really helped me again, like communicate in terms of like situation, complication, resolution. So that's like
that's like almost that's the McKinsey version of the Disney model, right? Which is like stuff happens to the Disney princess, turmoil is experienced, and then ultimately...
I think, the difference is like McKinsey probably charge you like £1 million for that, and Disney might be like a little bit less. But yeah, I probably use that like 70% of my presentations, so yeah, works for me.
And I think actually, you know, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I think one of the things we wanted to get the chance to reflect on was people's career progression and how they got where they are and what reflections they might offer. And I think what's nice is we suddenly realised that all three of you have made almost the same decision, which is to move away from being in-house and to kind of set up on your own in some way, but you're kind of at different stages. So Kiera's just starting out, Jonathan's kind of in the middle, and then Anna's a bit further along. So I don't know if we want to go, what's your one reflection of like what you've learned from what you're doing, what you've done with your career, and like how did you get to where you are? In any order. Maybe we start with Kiera and then we can go on each.
Okay. Without going in chronological order, I started out as an insight and analytics assistant agency in Brighton. And then I actually went into data analytics. I was SQL coding for about a year, and then followed on into digital analytics, corporate, and then agency also. I guess for me, I definitely did do what you said there. Like when I was starting out, I was like, oh my God, I don't know anything. I wouldn't ask questions enough. I used to stress myself out quite a lot. Whereas as I got a little bit older, like you said, talking to people around you and being more open, I learned more. And then it's also seen as you're personable, right? You haven't got like a huge ego because you're actually asking questions and being vulnerable. So it's quite good for that, I think. So as the experience in years come, like no one's out to get you or go, oh, you're thick. Like no, like you're asking a question to try and learn. So I think that's so important. But because I worked so many years in like corporate, I've been a little bit under a rock recently. So when GA4 came out last year and I was working with big pharma companies, I was the only analyst in the team. So I couldn't bounce any ideas off anyone. I couldn't really say to anyone, like, is this terrible? Or am I just really not getting it? Am I quite stupid? So I actually think, like, if you are in that situation, keep coming to stuff like this and talking to other professionals, because then you'll get sort of either reassurance, or if not, you'll find someone that can actually answer and help those questions. And I think the continuous improvement is really important, like just continue learning in whatever field that is. So I guess, the too long didn't read is basically, as you get older or more experienced, I think you're more open and you just ask more questions. And if you're at the start of your career, you should do that because you'll save yourself a lot of stress.
Yeah, I was going to say probably like starting out, like the first is like this concept of the open mindset. I think if you're like what we were talking about, what we were talking about, they were talking about last night at the SEO Mindset podcast, is like that always be curious. So I think having that open mindset and being able or wanting to learn, I think like I feel quite privileged that I can like sort of sit here today. You know, I feel quite lucky that I'm able to do that, and not everyone is sort of as lucky as me. You know, I know a lot of people come here and they have to pay for their own tickets, they have to take time off for holiday as well. So the one thing I'd say is if you can't get out as much, is there is a hell of a lot of information out there in the ether, just like floating around. But I think generally, like, people always help each other out as well, which absolutely really, like, to begin with, I was like, no, why would anyone want to help me if I've got a question? And actually, yeah, I'm really, really surprised that, you know, I can ask people questions and they're always willing to give up their time. So I think the main thing there is just try and find people that are like you, right? That have the similar values, think the same as you. And then over time, that'll help, you know. And, you know, I think just don't be afraid to approach someone with a question, because I think that curiosity is very important. But I also like this concept of exploring, right? I don't know where things are going to take me. I like that, like having the freedom to sort of see if I'm interested in something, and then just sort of go and explore that a bit more. So just try and just see what's out there. Don't turn down opportunities, and just find people like yourself. I think that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Find your people under all their different rocks, because this is actually how Brighton SEO started. I was, you know, there was big corporate SEO events out there 15 years ago. But, you know, I was in a little agency, you know, in the middle of nowhere, and trying to do SEO and thinking, who else out there even does this? Nobody around me knows what the heck this is. So, you know, there we were on Twitter talking about SEO, and then a few people sort of started talking quite regularly, and, you know, ended up going, well, let's meet up, let's do this. So that's, you know, how we ended up at the first ever Brighton SEO, is all about just keep asking people things, keep talking to people, keep learning. And that's how, over the years, I ended up, you know, preparing for the fact that I wanted to work for myself. But, you know, I was agency side, then I went in-house. When it came to returning from maternity leave, it didn't seem to make sense to go back to my in-house role. We don't talk about the fact they replaced me with 7 people, and then may have not wanted me to manage the team when I returned. So, because I wanted part-time. So anyway, set up on my own. There's never the right time. I had an 11-month-old kid, and I wanted to be mum, you know, but I also wanted to keep doing analytics, because I loved analytics, you know, that was my passion. Now I have to balance it between loving analytics, the child, and my business. There's never there's never the right time to set up on your own. There's never the right time, but you've just got to keep open mind. Keep talking to people, find your people, and run that idea past people. And then you will find that there are people who are like, yeah, of course you could do this. Or, you know what, in-house would really suit you. Or why don't you try agency? You like the diversity. Like, agency gives you so much diversity and the ability to jump between projects and do loads of different things. In-house is brilliant for people who like to do a lot of time on the same thing and really dig deep. So if you like finishing a job properly and doing deep dives, then in-house might be for you. It also is a great experience to be able to see the whole stance of a business from, you know, the ground up. I was working with customer experience team, even the workshop team who are building the products, through to product marketers, brand marketers, international team. You get to work with so many different people when you're in-house. Agency, you see a bit of it, but you get to see lots of little bits. But then, yeah, dive in, do what's right for you as well. So I'd been talking to people for years, trying to sort of work out where I was going to go, always wanted to do my own kind of thing at some point. Obviously picked an awkward time to set up on my own, but it worked. You know, if you want it enough, or if you've got enough people supporting you, you can make anything work. So yeah, just don't feel like an imposter. Don't lack that confidence. Put out those connections. Prepare, but you'll never prepare for everything. You know, none of us saw COVID coming, or GA4 for that matter. So yeah, there's always going to be things, and the journey, it's not a straight line. You know, your trend graph is because there's lows and highs, right? That's okay. You've got to accept those lows. You've got to have those people around you for when you want it. So yeah, don't be afraid. Just keep learning, keep talking to people. I'm starting to sound like a motivational speaker.
No regrets. So across the three of you, quick, you know, sense check. Are you happy that you made the change? I
could never work for anybody else. I'm unemployable. So yeah, it's fine.
Hence the intro requiring the word feisty earlier. So
I think for me, like I'm starting out, so it's only been a few months. It is obviously like concerning financially, but I'm all right. But what I will say is I have so much more drive to do it for myself. Like I'm continuously learning. Like I've learned more in the last sort of several months knowing I was going to go freelance than I ever did in like my corporate job where it's just like, oh, dumb. It was that because for me there was no drive to sort of to be better. So for me, I am really glad I did it. And the thing is as well, right, like you got to try things because I would regret not trying this. So if I don't succeed, I've tried it. You know what I mean? But I won't look back in 30 years and go, oh, I could have done it for myself and a lot better. So it's always good to try things. And then, yeah, what is it? I think like Cher said something like that. Like you should do things, regret the things that you did do, not the ones that you didn't.
Yeah, I'd rather run an angle grinder over my toes than go back to working for someone else.
Quote of the day.
So it's nice being your own boss and you get to make decisions. But with that, you do have to work maybe sometimes antisocial hours. You have to sort of you have to do other stuff that isn't as fun, like chasing up late payments, trying to win new clients, so on and so forth. So it's great being your own boss, but there are some nice stuff to go with it. But yeah, I wouldn't go back for anything. Thank you.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I was going to offer out so that if anyone does have any burning questions, either related to GA4 or to something else that we've talked about, we've probably got enough time for like maybe 2 questions from the audience, I guess. So does anyone have anything they'd like to ask any of the 4 of us? Ooh. Right at the front.
Run. You've got to be...
Because the recording won't be able to hear you, that's why.
Forgot that was recorded. Just what are the 3 of you finding are the most common queries that you're getting around GA4?
Trust. They don't trust the data. Yeah, is it accurate and is it not? So then you have to audit it and work out, is it one of the known issues? Is it that you've set it up wrong? Which often it is. People don't realise. I ran a GA4 training course yesterday. One person had an average add to cart value of 12. They hadn't noticed. But, they knew there were some issues, but it's a case of finding out why every time you hit add to cart, it fires 6 times or more. So, yeah, you've really got to understand, is it as accurate as it can be, even though it's not going to be fully accurate? So that's a lot of what we're looking at the moment.
Yeah, I'd say like consent mode's been just general shit show for everyone. Loads of, basically people try and set it up, goes wrong. So you're basically redoing stuff again. So that's like problem number 1, because you end up having to like retrospectively try and like fix stuff that. And then I think just loads of like whatever platform someone on, there's always like more than one thing, like sending data to a tag. So there's just like implementation. There's a lot of implementation problems. But then there's like platform bugs. So you don't know if it's an implementation problem, platform bug, or both. So, and then or consent mode. So it's just like, we'll get a dartboard, throw it at it, like bullseye.
Yeah, for me it's also trust. So earlier in the year we had a client, they're putting a lot of money into LinkedIn ads and Facebook ads, and then they're saying, well, you're saying that we're getting all this traffic, from like Meta Business Manager, but when I look at my GA4, that's totally different. And then it's an education piece again, and it's also like the direct traffic bug and things like that. And even as a freelancer, I was ad hoc helping someone out, and they had exactly the same issue. So it's kind of querying the data, trusting the data. They're even then querying like, well, is this correct or not? And then it's, again, the education piece, like a session is different to a click, that kind of stuff.
And Meta's just greedy. Sorry.
Do we have another question in the room? Oh, got 2.5, 3. Both your hands went up at the same time, so almost.
Hi, I just wanted to ask you about sort of data democratization. It's something I'm trying to push within our organisation, but battling against many of the challenges you mentioned about implementation issues, platform issues, and it's quite hard to sort of do both at the same, well, do it whilst people are battling against those things and trying to convince people that it's worthwhile, when sometimes I can't really explain why things aren't what they seem, and people sort of are like, well, why should I bother? Like, this is difficult. Like, do you have any advice about how to make progress there, given all that messiness?
So on that point, when you've got trust issues with the data, I think something you picked up upon earlier is you have to kind of caveat it. So no data set is ever going to be complete when you look at big data and sort of SQL statistics and things like that. So be open with that for a start. Say, look, this is caveated, and say this is not just our problem here. This is the industry. This is, like if you're whoever you're working for then says, well, is our competitor doing this or that? I mean, I had someone say to me, why can't you give me the Twitter analytics for this pharmaceutical company? I said, because that's your competitor. So it's just things like that. I think being very open and honest about the issues with the data, and then saying, look, this is something that's industry-wide, and it's all about communicating that. So it is being like confident in yourself. Like, this is not like a you problem or a me problem. Like, this is just the way it is. It is the way it is. And if you're open with them, I think they'll build more trust in you as an individual and then get that buy-in. But it is incredibly difficult. And I always go back to the incentives. Like, why would they even be interested in this? When I've done training sessions, I have done this also and said, you could use these digital analytics statistics to build a case study for you getting a promotion. That's how I try and get people's buy-in, because then they sort of switch on and they go, I am interested now. So I always try and think of something like, why would they care? And bring it back to that.
Yeah, I think
we've got 30 seconds left according to the clock.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably like an education piece, like the good old lunch and learn, right? So I think there's like things you can do there with like all these like known like quirks to actually just start doing different sessions with people just to communicate some of those problems and take stakeholders through what these issues are, but then being clear in terms of this is what we do know, and this will give us confidence to make this decision, which will help us get to basically the commercial outcome that we're looking for.
Absolutely. So once you've tried Kiera's method, and then you've tried Jonathan's method, I resort to the third unprofessional method: drink gin and pivot. You just got to reframe it sometimes. Take a step back, think about how else you can approach it. And yeah, sometimes you won't win all your battles, but just keep trying. It's definitely worth it. I'm going to get that on a t-shirt. Drink gin and pivot.
Yeah. There's like 10 GA4 implementations. There's 10 different flavors of it. So I've seen emojis, I've seen green. How do you standardize analysis of that, given every one of them will guarantee to be?
You can't standardize it these days, really.
You should come to my talk tomorrow.
Oh, nice. What time and what is it about?
Yeah, I'm doing like a debugging talk tomorrow, but it's going to be like more of a framework, hopefully, in terms of like the how, what, where, when, and why tags are firing, basically. So hopefully if I've done like an okay job, you'll feel better, maybe.
And what time is your talk?
I think it's like 1:40 tomorrow, same sort of slot, Syndicate 3-4.
And what's your talk?
I'm talking tomorrow at Measure Fest around the same time about Matoma Analytics. It's an alternative analytics platform, a bit more on the data privacy. Some of the clients I worked with earlier in the year used it mainly in Europe because of GDPR and things like that, and lack of trust in Google and what they're doing with their data. So yeah, I'm just doing like an intro to just an alternative analytics system.
If I was going to answer the question, remembering that was the point, then you've got to. It doesn't all have to be standardized, because you've got to customize it for everybody's individual needs. So you've got to have almost a template that is adaptable. So your measurement framework will then, populate it to go in certain directions. And also, it's got to suit the client's needs, or if you're in-house, you've got to suit the business needs. So again, it's thinking about making it relatable, making it fit the objectives. Those are the key things, and then being able to communicate the data nicely. So you've got to build the reporting interface in a way that communicates the data effectively for those purposes, in a way that makes sense to those people. It just ties everything we've said together really nicely, doesn't it? But yeah, no, you can come up with a framework, but don't ever just try and stick to that, or you will be stuck in a box forever. So just keep exploring the options and keep making it relevant.
And in case anyone wanted to know, my talk is at 3:20 tomorrow. So I'm talking about CRO and experimentation in the afternoon session as part of MeasureFest. So you've got lots of us do. So Anna was doing the training program yesterday, and then the rest of us are all walking at some point in time. So please do come and check out, depending on what your flavour of thing that you're interested in listening to. But I guess we can wrap up there. I just want to say thank you so much for the questions in the room, but also a massive round of applause for the panel. Thank you.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.